Welcome to the Top Lines and Tails Livestock podcast, and welcome to a special episode, should I say, this week, because it is our 200th episode. Yes, 200 episodes of Top Lines and Tails out there for you to listen to as have happened and been recorded over the last 4 years. And this week, another special episode because I'm recording on location. This recording is still coming to you from Australia, and I hope you enjoy this one because it is something slightly different, maybe not quite so livestock orientated, but a fascinating story from two fascinating people. As always, don't forget, we'd like to thank our sponsors, Harbro, for their continued support in helping us get to this 200th episode. And this time on Top Lines and Tails, I'm back in Australia. I've been in Australia, I haven't actually gone home yet. This was recorded a few weeks ago there. And I'm along with some people that I like to call friends, Mike and Jane Rocks. And I have to say they're possibly the most adventurous people that I've ever met, and some of the nicest as well. So, Mike, I'll say welcome, and I'm actually in your house. So thank you for putting me up in your sort of pseudo house.
Well, welcome to you, and Andy, and welcome to Wendy. It's great to have you on our next adventure.
And we say an adventure. At the moment, we're sitting in Mike's building, which, of course, is built for cattle and not for people, although we happen to be living in it just now because he's waiting the planning permission for putting up a new house, Mike, and a bit of a trauma. We're going to go back to go through your life history, but at the moment, you're into chapter 37 of what has probably been, or 38, whatever has been a very interesting life you've had.
I think we've actually gone full circle, if one can go full circle and know about it. We're back with a few head of cattle and on 100 acres, and we're really, really enjoying it.
You are indeed. And Jane's here. She says she's not going to speak to us, but she's going to say hello. Say hello, Jane.
Hello, Jane.
So go back historically. Yeah, farming has been in your blood, I'm pretty sure of that, and both your grandfather had connections with farming, and I think Jane's grandfather had connections with farming as well. So just tell me about your upbringing, Mike, and how farming sort of fitted into that.
Well, I think if I jump way back, our forefathers and mothers, I don't know why they say forefathers, but forefathers and mothers came out originally from Ireland and Scotland, and the Scottish contingent were farmers in Scotland and were hired by the Australian Agricultural Company in the early 1800s and came to Australia by ship, as you had to do in those days. It took a long time, and they farmed from Melbourne right up into Queensland. So that was that side of it. And my father's side from Ireland, they were farming in Ireland and involved in horses over there, and once again arrived in Melbourne, where a lot of people in the early days that got disembarked in Melbourne.
And Australia is just that, isn't it? It's a land full of entrepreneurs, certainly in the farming country, and people. Australia is populated by people from all over the world. Obviously, there's the indigenous race that was here originally, but a lot of people in Australia do have that entrepreneurial spirit because they've taken the chance to go 10, 12, 15,000 miles around the world. I don't know how far around the world 15,000 goes, but around the world to come here and stick a stick in the ground and have a go at doing whatever they want to do. And there's opportunities here for people to do that, and there still is, Mike.
Well, there is, but a funny twist to the side is, and it might mean why I'm like I am, continually trying something new, that one of my great-great-grandparents, I'm sorry, I should have my sister here, she'll tell you exactly who it was and when it was. They stopped in India on the way over in the sailing ship, and he got off to go and look at some horses and missed the ship and didn't turn up for another 12 months. So it must have been funny days, really.
Did he bring the horses with him?
No. You couldn't just go to the airport and get on a A380, which, yeah, it's interesting. But And my father, my grandfather, the Irish contingent, my grandfather was approximately the 12th registered veterinary surgeon in New South Wales back in the turn of the century, 1900s. And my father pursued that as well and was a vet, but sadly they passed away both 6 weeks apart in 1956.
You were very young then, weren't you?
I was only 7 then. So, yeah, we lost a lot. We lost, now looking back, must have lost so much information about them and what they wanted to do and what they wanted to achieve.
But forward thinking, I remember you saying your father and your grandfather, they pioneered various things.
They both, and incredibly, my grandfather did a lot of forward thinking with chickens, would you believe? He was a famous horseman and beef cattle man, but he was really into the prelude of having chickens and having them on the plate the next day for people. So that was really early stuff. And my father actually, after he was invalided out of the war, wanted to. Well, he went into the American Merchant Navy for a while and went right up through the islands, and he'd studied refrigeration on ships and how in those days you could transport fresh food, freeze it, and get it across the world. And he actually went North Queensland, Ingham, which is a long way up in Queensland, and had a veterinary practice up there and was pursuing his ideals before he got too sick and life took over. But what if I say, anyway.
Indeed. And tell me, well, I'll ask Jane, but you can tell me yourself a little bit about Jane's family, because they had farming connections too.
Yes, they did. Jane's great-great-grandmother, I hope I've got that right, she started a famous jam company in Australia, in Hobart, and she called it IXL. And she was making jams and all sorts of, what would you say, honey products and things like that. But it turned into they sold to Henry Jones, who actually was employed to play the piano, or not the piano, what was it, the organ, because they're actually Quakers, and every morning he'd play the organ and they'd have this service and then start work. But he finally bought the place out, and the house and the factory on Hobart is a boutique hotel now. It's one of the oldest establishments in Australia. But anyway.
So Jane's family, so moving on, more recent times where they were in the farming business, and that again is in Jane's blood.
My uncle came back from the war and he got a war service loan, and he started farming, not knowing anything about it, but did sheep and wheat.
Okay.
Yeah, like a lot of soldiers came back and were given soldier settlement grants and went off, and Jane's father's parents had property on the Richmond River and very rich farmland there, and they had cattle. And following on from that, Jane's uncle came back from the war and took a soldier settlement grant of land out at Gunnedah, and was deeply into sheep and wheat. And yes, so there's a mixture in both sides of us to be involved in agriculture.
So we'll go back. We were sitting by the fire last night and hearing of interesting stories about when you first met. This is a livestock podcast. We're not going to go through all of those, but you were living in, you've been to agricultural college, I think, Mike, and then you were living in Sydney, wheeling and dealing in your probably second or third business, I think, by the time you got to meet Jane, and Jane was in business as well. But so you guys kind of started, as I said, exploring the adventurous story that you've had. So, yeah, Mike, I believe your first business was saddlery. So we're back to livestock. There's farming. Is that because you came from agricultural colleges and saw a market in there?
Well, I didn't finish my diploma at Ag College, which was unfortunate. I got to nearly the end of the first year, and other circumstances intervened, and off I went. But I worked for the government for quite some time, and although I had a good career in the government, I wanted to get out and do something myself. So
and that was accounts, wasn't it?
To the taxation office.
You're the tax man, that's it.
Yeah.
Everybody be fair. Listen to this, Mike is still around, the tax man. They never forget. These are like elephants, these tax men, So he could still come and get you yet, so keep looking over your shoulder.
You're taking an oath of secrecy there in the old days, and that was where it was. But no, I always had this yearning to have a plot of land, and after Jane and I met, we bought a small acreage on the mid-north coast of New South Wales, and we had just built our first house, and we're back doing that now. So it's that's why I say we've gone first circle.
Yeah, and you had a business together then. Was that when you got into the bees? I seem to remember you being with bees, or have I missed a bit here? Because there's so many stories and chapters you guys
There's a lot
have got.
goes on. But I always loved bees when I was at college, and the honey business. So I ended up getting about 300 hives, and we produced honey on the coast and inland around Coolah on some of Jane's relatives' properties. We left hives out there, and we worked the summer and winter. And we developed that into a small honey packing business and became reasonably successful with it. And I look at today, we saw the people at one of the stands at Tamworth, and they were really worried about the varroa mite and its effects on the bees and the native bees, and how Australian producers are going to survive this with pollinating their crops, and crops like lucerne and things like that, and for feed.
I say this is a livestock business. The bee, of course, is a livestock, I suppose, and it's a central part of the cycle. Yeah. And a central part of farming as well. So we can't afford to lose those bees, and we can't afford to overlook them, really.
No, well, pollination for apiarists in Australia is has been and is a very big business. And I think I was not shocked, but way back when we were doing it, I think there was no import of honey to Australia. And just broadly speaking, bee diseases are transmitted in honey. And well, I won't say much more about that because it annoys me. If we've the island of Australia has contracted varroa mite from overseas because some government let them
import honey.
Yeah.
Import honey. You were saying, we were talking about it last night by the fire, and so, importing honey because it was cheaper to bring honey in from overseas, and somebody let that come in, and there we go. That's how we can upset things.
Yeah, so that's another avenue one would have, if had time, pursue and see how that all happened. But yes,
and then you moved on. I've got a list of things: a real estate business, a security business. You had before that eventually got to the farming. I seem to remember you talking to me sometime about some kind of hydraulic hose business that you got set up. Loads of things. Not tried and failed, but tried and succeeded and moved on with. You've always been an entrepreneur with an eye on something that you think might just help and improve people's lives.
Yes, well, I don't know what drives that passion to go and do something else, and some people would look upon that as being a
drifter.
Well, a drifter, or you failed at that, or you didn't. We have Joe and I have a philosophy: we've never failed at anything. We've experimented and succeeded in everything we've wanted to do, and then for some reason we move on. Mm-hmm. But we did get into dairy farming. I did that by having a job selling for Alpha Laval dairy equipment.
That's kind of where we come into it now. Yeah. You got into selling dairy equipment and then moved in, I think, to partnership in a farm originally. Roughly, where are you now? You're somewhere central New South Wales, so north of Sydney somewhere.
On the mid-north coast, we went into a partnership with our first dairy entree, and then went on to a leasehold, which was a beautiful lease, and then ended up buying a farm on the Upper Hunter at a place called Scone. And that's where our dairy farming, we really enjoyed the business until once again something jogs your business mind, says deregulation's on the horizon. Do you really want to ride that one down the slippery dip? And we decided not to. And
Let's just go a little bit deeper into that farming business that you had then. Scone, or Scoon, as our Scottish listeners, of course, will know, spelt the same, is a big horse area around that area. It would be some fairly good land. You bought a farm and you got into Ayrshire. I think the Ayrshire cattle came with you originally to the farm from the partnership that you had, and then some top herd of Ayrshires you had. I mean, don't play it down.
No, we did. We had a very good stud Ayrshire herd that we took our share of, and we increased the herd size with a stud Holstein Friesian herd, and I feel that we were quite successful there. But the problem is, at the end of the day, you need to make money, and what the business plan to me was that unless we got very big, we had to get out. And we're talking going from a 6-a-side, 12-a-side herringbone to a 50-stand rotary and herd sizes of 500 head.
And the millions of investment that takes to get in, and it is, and the family farm business, as we know, is under threat around the world. And for making money from a family farm, as you said, the only way really is to overtrade and get bigger, and that's not an easy route to go down. And if you can't see the pennies coming in, it's as you said, you made the decision. You brought your family up on the farm there, I think, and they had a lovely childhood. Your son Tim worked for me for a short while, and hi Tim if you're listening, and Shelley, and they grew up on the farm, and I think that made them the rounded people that they are. So I mean, there's a lot of merits to what you did during that farming career before you decided, hang on, this maybe isn't working, and then what's next?
Well, we moved on and had various income sources, and we moved to Brisbane and put the 2 kids through school there, and when they got to uni age, we decided let's go to Europe and experiment while they go to uni, and we'll go and have some fun in France or Italy or somewhere. And we end up settling down in France and bought a 750-year-old ruin on 21 acres and set to developing it.
This is where, when I said the most adventurous people, the most able people that I know, Mike and Jane, we met together in France. We've had some good boozy nights over the years being in France. As a listener will know, Wendy and I have lived in France for 20 years now. It's a great time. But I mean, your house, when you say ruin, it literally was a ruin. And the pair of you, with no additional help, having built a house before, decided you could take this thing on and did everything from putting a roof on. I came around one day and Jane's driving a digger, digging out your what's going to be your sitting room in there, and plastering, plumbing, doing everything between you. And you work as such a great team between yourselves that it was a huge, anybody else would look at that and think you're mental, but that was a huge project. In 12 years, you had a most magnificent home there in France.
Well, we did, and it was a journey that, you couldn't pay for. But and all good things seem to come to a sort of not an abrupt end, but it takes quite a while to sell a property in France, and so we were trying to plan our next venture, where we were going, coming back to Australia or what. But it sort of just happened. We put the place on the market, and we sold it very, very quickly, and that was it. So.
Yeah, well, we'll go back to that property because, again, 20-acre property, 25 acres, whatever it was, you planted trees, and you planted a lot of trees on there, but we were in just the south end of the Bordeaux, the north end of the Duras region, so in a top wine-growing region, some great wine growing around there, some great wines around there, and the guys came to you and said, your next-door neighbours came and said, can we stick some vines on your place? So the next thing, you've gone from being a livestock farmer, instead of putting livestock on this one, you ended up with a vineyard.
Well, we did. We ended up selling that section off to our neighbours from the local village, but we did plant something like 6,500 trees as seed stock, or not seed stock, but very small root stock. American oaks and pine maritime from the Bordeaux coastal region, and that was a lot of fun. But it amazing in that time the forest grew, and we had forest with deer in it and wild boar, and a lot of fun. And
the vines, the vineyard that bought those vines or took the land from you there to grow those vines called Verrier, and you managed to get us a great deal at Verrier. So we used to, between us, 2 or 3 of us would go into Verrier and buy wine by the pallet, and excellent stuff it was as well. So I'm always indebted to you, Mike. In fact, if you can still get us that deal, we'll have some more. It was pretty good. Well,
La Verrier is still thriving, and their wine, the Bordeaux Superior reds and whites, and their aged reds and whites are supreme. And we've made some amazing friends in France, and a lot of our heart is still there.
Yeah. And then whatever chapter that was, the next chapter, another adventure, they go and buy a boat, not just a boat, with the biggest F-off yacht that I've ever been on in my life. Beautiful machine. The Well, tell me more about this. It wasn't just a boat, was it, Mike? It was a gin palace and some.
No, it was Andy. Look, Jane and I had done quite a bit of sailing in Sydney in the early days, and I just thought, wow, wouldn't it be amazing to have a yacht to cruise the Mediterranean and add something else to our lifestyle before we go back to Oz. And we did. We bought a Jeanneau 57, and we sailed it through up the Portuguese coast to across to France, and then from France up the Irish Sea, which was an incredible feat, stopping off in Ireland, Dunleary, and then to the Clyde in Scotland, which is an amazing thing. I only found out since I've been back in Australia that my father sailed on the Queen Mary when it was the first troop ship going from Australia with the AIF in late 39-40, early 40 to go and help it unite, and then
Anzac Army, yeah.
With the Anzacs and that, and they landed in Gourock in the Clyde, and it was just across the Clyde from where we were based for quite some time, and I think that's amazing, really.
Yeah, it is.
I think we sailed there.
Amazing coincidence, or maybe not, maybe it's fate, but you ended up being there, and then, of course, the dreaded COVID hit in. I mean, and the, I won't say the fast, but the time of our lives there, listeners will all know the time of our lives that was called lockdown. We were in there, and the first lockdown, you ended up being, I think, on the holy lockdown, I think we called it. You were on the holy lock or round about there.
We were, well, actually, we were based there for quite a while, but we actually had sailed around to Loch Fyne. If anyone looks at the maps, or the Scottish people will know, and English people will know, we were at Port Avati, and we were there for a good 5 months, I'd say, by ourselves on the marina, and we weren't allowed to go anywhere. We couldn't even go put the rib in the water and go out and fish. We were stuck on the marina, and that was exciting.
There's worse places to be, Mike, but even that, it would be to get a wee bit tight. And then, so next chapter, I don't know anybody's counting these, but chapter whatever we're coming to next, it was... we're going to go back to Australia. I mean, I say this is a livestock podcast. I'm looking just past Mike now, and I can see his Angus heifers just in the sunset, just in the field behind me, looking beautiful. So we'll get round to the livestock again in a minute, listeners. So the next movement then was to take yourselves and the boat. This is a 57-foot yacht. I won't tell you what he paid for it. I know what it was, an eye-watering figure. And then take that yacht, ship it, or not sail it, but ship it back to Australia and yourselves with it, and the next chapter. And we all missed you, and you've obviously been back in the UK a lot since, but now we're down here staying with you. So give us a reason, or give us an idea why suddenly the next chapter was to come back to us.
Well, we felt that we couldn't
Visa ran out.
really stay in the EU or the UK. It's an issue of visas, and as Commonwealth subjects, one wishes one day that we all have this free travel and length of stay, because I think we have earned it as people, as part of the Commonwealth, and I'm quite strong about that, and vice versa. British, Irish, Welsh, Scottish, Canadian, we should all be free flowing.
So basically, having been away from Australia, you've been in France 12 years, I think, probably another 2, so you 13, 14, 15 years that you'd been away. And they could know, still, the fact you'd been there all that time, they wouldn't give you a visa to stay there any longer, or without reapplying for it every 5 minutes, or whatever it was you had to go through.
Well, yes, it's quite I think there's an age thing, but the funny twist to this is our son is now living and married, and we have 2 beautiful grandsons.
You've got me slightly to blame for that, because Tim came to work for me in Scotland when we were renovating houses, and he ended up staying there, and you're right, married a girl from
and now he's living in Scotland, so we've now got a reason. Well, we have a very good reason to travel back to Scotland, but he's now officially able to live in Scotland, and it's quite a twist to the family
And running a successful building and flooring business over there, and doing very well with the grandchildren, as you say. So let's just move that one on a little bit. So to come, you're arriving back in Australia like the £10 Palms, back here with a big boat to live on, and into Sydney, into Sydney, I think we go.
Yeah, we knew what we wanted to do with the yacht, and once again, the COVID came back for a second lash at us while we were in the midst of just settling down. I think we'd been on the yacht for six months and sailed here and there. But I went down to Sydney from Brisbane just basically for 2 weeks to check on the yacht at a stage, and got locked down for 6 months in Sydney or New South Wales and not able to go back to Queensland. So that made us think a lot, and then we decided to put the yacht on the market. Then.
Well, and I'll just step back into that, and I mean, we've talked about this, the ridicule maybe isn't the right word, but, some of this lockdown, the rules in New South Wales were so strong. Jane was in Brisbane because one of her nephews was poorly, so Jane was up there. Am I right in thinking Jane was in Brisbane and
with the granddaughter?
With the granddaughter, that's right. Sorry, granddaughter. And Mark, you were there in 6 months. You couldn't even get in the car to go in. Well, you couldn't get off the boat. I don't think you were stuck in Sydney Harbour. There's worse places to be stuck, but not on your own, surely.
No, well, actually, they wouldn't allow you to go to the boat, and they had this 5 kilometre. You could go out.
So you couldn't go onto the boat?
No, you couldn't go out to the boat. And a radius of 5 kilometres of where you were domiciled. So, yeah, it was a frustrating time. And hey, when we sat back in Port Vardy and envisaged being back in Australia and possibly sailing, Sydney to the Great Barrier Reef and things like that, that we just... those plans suddenly melted, and once again, for no real reason, we decided to move on and sell the yacht and sort out another adventure.
Next adventure was buying a townhouse in Brisbane, which was you showed us the plans. It was on an estate, lovely house. I think you had to put a down payment on it, all ready to go. Very excited about the fact you're going to get this house, maybe your retirement home that you're going to stay in there. And then I think you were staying with us in Scotland. You got a phone call to say it's going to be another couple of years before they managed to finish building this thing, because the builders and COVID, maybe they blamed for staff and what have you. And eventually I think the builders went bust for a while. So another adventure, which was hugely frustrating, Mike. I mean, I remember the look on your face at the time when you suddenly realised that you're going to be living with your daughter or wherever before you could, not anything, Shelley, if you're listening, they didn't mind living with you, but not being able to get to relieve, to take that dream and another kick in the pants, I think, really for you. But you persevered with it.
Well, we did. We rode the we bought this off plan, and that's always a gamble, and you never know when it's going to come to fruition. But I think in the next month or so, it actually we'll be able to have full title of the place and
5
move
years.
in there.
5 years since you first put your pennies into it, or for the best part of 5 years.
But in the waiting time, once again, we got restless and looked at a lot of land in the New England area. And last July, we actually purchased 100 acres, just under 100 acres, outside of 20 k's west of Tenterfield, northwest of Tenterfield. And that's where we are now.
That's where where we are now. And Tenterfield, for the listeners, you're in a happy medium halfway between. I suppose you're about 2/3 of the way up from Sydney towards Brisbane, about 4 hours from Brisbane. 7 or 8 hours from Sydney. Bear in mind, Australia is a big country and fantastic part. I mean, let's talk a little bit about this area before maybe we go on to what you're doing here. But it's Springvale. I think it was one big farming unit originally, one big estate, and then they split it up into plots. And as you said, you were lucky to get this 100 acres in a beautiful spot.
Yes, I think it must have been an amazing property in its full title. But today there's property, basically 100-acre properties, some 60. This area is split into, and then we have large acre neighbours with 2,000+ acres. So, yeah, it's a beautiful valley. We're at an altitude of about 750 metres where we are, so we get beautiful 4 seasons, which we love.
I mentioned those of you that listen to or watch the title of this program. Mike and Jane's surname is Rocks, Mike Rocks, and the property is called Rocky Glen, and it's not called Rocky Glen because of Mike and Jane Rocks. It's because it's full of rock. I'll put some pictures up, some fantastic standing stones all about it, all through the whole of this property, and a creek running through the middle, running water running both sides of you, and a couple of those dammed up so that the animals can go and graze. And then you arrived here, put the stick in the sand, thinking we're not quite sure, with a tent, not quite sure where they're going. But bearing in mind now you're into your 70s by this time, not quite sure we're going to be to stick a stick in the sand and think, right, we're going to build a house here. And that's the bit that hasn't quite materialized, but we'll go through the reasons why of that, Mike. But I mean, vision. Jesus, nobody's got vision like that to go in here and say, right, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to stick myself a house here.
Well, it's funny, we don't look upon building the house as a difficult task.
Bearing in mind you've done a few
Bearing
before.
in mind what we have done in that way. And so we do have the kit home here now. We're waiting on final planning permission to do what we need to do. We envisage by Christmas, hopefully having it quite finished, if one could say, and early next year probably a beautiful home here and a beautiful place for our family and our friends to come and stay and live and enjoy what we've got.
And it is beautiful. And Mike and Jane have gladly put us up for a few days. But my reason for being in Australia, as those that listen to the podcast will know, is that we came over for the World Angus Forum that was in Tamworth, which is about 3 or 4 hours south of here. And before that, you'd been out, both of you had been out there, you built this bloody great big shed, but on your own. I mean, I'm looking at steel girders above my head here, they're sort of, 3-4 foot across, a big slab, roller shutter doors, the place is, 12 metres by 12 metres, whatever it is, and built the whole thing on your own, which is in itself, no disrespect, but for the age that you are, you're so fit and mobile to do these things, and don't see anything as a challenge. And so that, and the fencing, you spent 3 or 4 months of fencing. That's before we even get any stockades. Right, I've got to get the place right. A lot of work.
Yes, it is a lot of work. I mean, the shed it did surprise Jane and I, the actual structure of it, the trusses and that, a bit larger than the last one we did. We've done a few sheds, but this was quite big. But we just nibble away at things every day, have a plan and get up. And I think that's the spirit we have, is that if you have something to go to each day with, you put your effort in it and you achieve it. At the end of the day, you've achieved,
There's an expression, I used to be in the software business, and an expression that eat the elephant one bite at a time. And I think that's pretty much what you guys do.
A forkful at a time. Yeah, that's what we do. Yeah. And that's the way we'll do with a house. People say, when are we going to finish it or start it? And actually, I think for the first time in our life, we're at peace. We know we're going to start it when we get permission, and it will happen.
And that's imminent. I mean, that is in the next few weeks, expecting that permission to come through. Firstly, they've got to put a slab down, and obviously then you've got to build the house. And you are planning on building the house. I mean, Mike's not joking. It's like a big Meccano set there sitting on pallets in the garden, right behind him where we're sitting. And once you get the go-ahead, in 3 or 4 weeks, you guys will have the entire shell up there and nobody would question the fact that you're both capable of doing it. So let's just move on. As I said, we are a livestock podcast. We've gone a little bit off track here with this one, but you decided to get into cattle, and you bought yourself some Angus cattle and did your homework, looked about, bought some locally, ended up with 22 lovely young heifers here that are between sort of 8 and 12 months old. And our next plan now is to start breeding a few Angus cattle.
Yes, well, they're beautiful cattle, and the difference between raising beef cattle and having a dairy farm is like cheese and chalk. Honestly, we are just enjoying it so much, just having the.
Well, it's less work.
I'm not saying it's less work, and each is an industry on its own. But yes, we are hopeful of having the heifers have calves and.
And that's the next thing. And so you came down to meet me, thankfully. Mike, for those of you who bought Aberdeen Angus history book in Southern Hemisphere there. Mike and Jane have sent a few out for us from there. We shipped some books down here for the expo, and you came down to the expo, and I think it opened my eyes. And you guys that are listening to this, you'll have heard the podcast that we did recently live from the expo, and Mike and Jane were there with us, and a fantastic event that was. But it was eye-opening. But from your point of view as well, with an Angus head on now, you would have seen and learnt a lot of how this industry works.
It was an amazing event, and hats off to the World Angus Forum and Angus breeders and everyone who contributed to it. It was just an amazing event, and the amount of people we met from all over the world, from Portugal, France, Uruguay, you name it, Scotland. Everyone was there who had the makers and shakers were there, and in the Angus Society and breeders. So it was a great thing for us to go and be with you there and enjoy it together.
And I think you've now seen sort of other opportunities with the cattle here with regards to embryos and that sort of thing, maybe buying into the higher end of the genetics and doing something with that. I think it's, again, your mind is whirring after we came home from that there may be something slightly different that you might even take your, I mean, I'm not saying anything wrong with your Angus. You bought commercial Angus cows that will shoot and run in this place there, but maybe you might just see another opportunity to monetize it a different way.
Well, it is, and we've got so much on our plate at the moment, obviously with the house building coming up, but no, we love genetics. We love getting into that side of it and the breeding, and we're going to have, well, I say fun. We're going to have some fun with it, and and tap into the resources with people we've met and build and learn from that.
Yeah, and I'm rolling this back. A livestock podcast, as I said, the number one livestock podcast in the world, quoted recently there. The other livestock that you've got here are a bit of a pest to you there, which is one of the reasons you've had to fence the place there, because we're just to run a mock with kangaroos here. And people say, the roos are a bit of a pest, but I must have seen 100 other things since we've been here the last couple of days.
Well, they seem to pass through. I don't know how many live here permanently, but everyone has the same problem. And I'd like to think we could share it with them, but that might be a bit too...
Well, they were here first, mate.
Yeah, that's true. They were here first, but they don't bother us at the moment. We're not a big-scale operation. We're not pretending to be that. We're here. We're hobby people, and we're just going to enjoy our latter stages of this adventure, and who knows what.
Okay, but you have, I mean, both yourself and Jane have been out. They had to put a roadway. There was no roadway into this place, so literally, as I said, stick in the ground, saying I'm going to build there. You built a roadway, and then you put some nice trees, and then you had to fence all that because the roos would have come in and eaten all the trees. So they are, for all you like to share the land with them, they are a pest. And are they a big pest, do you think, to the farming community? Are they protected? I mean, I don't quite know how the farming business in Australia sees the roo as a pest. I know, but are they protected? Are they being overdone? Can you control them?
No. Well, I'm not really an authority on the kangaroo side of life in Australia, but they've been there all of my life. I've been, they're there wherever we've been in the country.
Have you got a license? Can you go out there and pop a few off if you need to?
Well, having been away for a while, yes, you do need to get a license to shoot them, but they are in a massive proportion. We have the other side of life who want to protect everything, and I feel that's fair. But if a kangaroo is taking away X amount of your feed every night, as opposed to your cows or your sheep eating it, I guess you're going to be wanting rid of them. But that's another story. Another
story it is. And I mean, there are other things here as well, dingoes and the various wild animals and things that are out here. But the koalas and there's wombats and all sorts of things in Australia that we don't get anywhere else in the world, and they're great to see and you live with.
All the wildlife, it should be protected for the future, but when it's in plague proportions, you must have some idea of how do you control it, and live with it. I think. But we've got massive amount of deer in Australia, all over Australia, and we're used to wild boar in France all the time. We've got boar here in Australia. Wild dogs, dingoes. That's another controversial, probably issue. I don't want to get into that.
No, there's plenty of those, and racial issues too.
No,
of course, with the natives.
I think the whole thing is about coexisting. I think somehow, and the happy and being able to do it.
Okay, let's just move on to one subject that's close to my heart, and certainly been closer to my heart in the last few weeks when I've been here, because we've been following the youth competition, youth Angus competition, where the youngsters have had an opportunity to come to Australia and compete in a competition of doing 20, 30 different competitions, should I say, fencing and dressing cattle and stock judging and all those sort of things. And they'll come here with their eyes open and see, and 12 teams from all over the world have come here and see that Australia's a great place, the Aussie people, great people, we all know that. The opportunity for youngsters to come into the industry is getting harder and harder worldwide, and to make money in the industry as well. And do you think that Australia are making that? Are they making that easier for people? Is there a chance for my listeners here, for instance? Some of my listeners in Ireland and England would be in their teens. Is there an opportunity for them to say, right, chuck my rucksack on my back and head off down there, find a chance, and maybe get into farming?
Oh, I definitely do think there's a road there from being a young person. And you don't have to. You could be living in Sydney or Brisbane or a country town. You don't necessarily have to be a child of a grazier or someone with property, cattle, sheep, or cropping. But I think that yes, the societies are there to the young youth. Agriculture.
Is it being encouraged enough to let the youngsters come into? I mean, you're not going to come here and buy a 10,000 acre farm overnight, but can they come in and get in? Is there a chance for somebody to come here? And I know what you paid for this place. I won't tell you, listener, but for them to come here and say, I can go to the bank and borrow X amount and buy myself 100 acres and work my way up from there. Is that something I should be telling my listeners to look out for? And is it to be encouraged over here, or will they be stopped at the door?
No, I think the opportunity in Australia is there, and whatever your entry level would be to start off, it is definitely there. There's a need for youth on agricultural farming enterprises, I believe.
Globally.
And there's enough people out there that would, yes, take you in and provide a journey for you to move through to finally possibly having your own land and do it. But I think that it's hard to, well, when I look back, it's hard to look back and say, you jump in and buy a property. Property prices in Australia are crazy. All over the world they're crazy. So I was amazed and heartened by the groups of young people that came to Australia to compete in this World Angus Youth Forum for competitions, and they were so well spoken in the sense they knew what they were doing, their craft. I think one of their exercises was they had to set up a camp and cook and in a sense do a bit of an Aussie type camp out, and I don't know how, I never saw that section, but I wish I had. But it's look, take a dream and follow it, and your life will change dramatically.
There you go. You're listening from a man who's taken a dream. A couple, should I say? Jane's sitting there saying, I'm not going to speak to you. A couple who have taken a dream and followed it, and then found another dream and followed that, and been hugely successful all their life and lived a fantastic life that a lot of us could only ever dream of competing in. But fantastic. And then the last thing maybe I will mention while we're here in Australia, you guys there would say Australia very much is a sheep nation. I mean, there's been over the centuries, the merino sheep, of course, here in Australia would be the front end of that. And I know people, listeners to this, will have been here sheep shearing. I've got quite a few friends of mine that would come down here, packed up the handpiece and come down here and got a job on a shearing gang. But that stuff's, I mean, the wool market has fallen out of bed. The job has changed. There's still sheep here. And there are. We've spoken to Graham Gilmore on this podcast, and I was with Graham this weekend. Hello, Graham, if you're listening. Where they're now breeding the Australian white sheep because it breeds the wool off those. But the sheep industry now, maybe the cattle industry and the Angus cattle industry, I think, has probably overtaken the sheep industry in Australia. Would it be right?
I couldn't answer that correctly, Andy. I do think wool and sheep in Australia is still a very, very big force, and one needs to, like, having met Graham, my eyes are open. I tell you what he's doing with the Australian whites is incredible, from a production of meat from paddock to plate, and not just doing it here, but doing it worldwide at the top level. I'm still shocked by the whole story that he has, and it's I would say I would like to hope that we do have a huge continuing sheep industry here in Australia. We've got the land, we've got the expertise, we've got the breeding. Yeah, it should continue.
And certainly, as I said, the Angus, I mean, it's quite evident driving the 3-4 hours that we drove up from Tamworth, 4 or 5 hours, that Angus cattle in every field. It used to be Hereford country around here, certainly from here downwards into Victoria was Hereford country. Now it's all Angus. The Angus has taken the front runner, and if the sheep industry is still here, well, you'll probably, I think your wife Jane is nodding to me now when I'm saying that she'd like to have a few sheep to complement these cattle that you've got here. There, Jane, would you like to tell us you want some sheep?
Definitely like some sheep, some Australian whites.
There we go, Australian whites. Mike, it's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you. And it's not just a pleasure to speak to you, but a pleasure to know you guys and a pleasure to see what you're doing here. And one last thing I've got to mention, and of course I have to mention on Top Lines and Tails podcast, that you'll know, is Wendy and I are big rugby fans. Of course, we've got the British Lions coming down here to play you guys in July there. Can you do your Mystic Meg and forecast the result? Are the Lions going to come down and put one on you?
I think the Wallabies will come to the forefront this year and show the Lions, the British Irish Lions, what Wallabies are made of. And I'm very, very keen to see what I'd see, a reasonably young team and with some solid stalwarts have been there through the last few years of international Wallabies.
And they are a young team, you're right, the Wallabies. And yes, I'm with you. I think 2 years ago everybody said that you'd write the Wallabies off, but you never write the Aussies off at anything. And certainly when it comes down to belief and self-belief, Australia have the edge on everybody in the world. Mike, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you here on Top Lines and Tails podcast, and we value the fact that you're still thinking in front of everybody else.
Thank you, Andy. Thanks for having me. Our friendship goes so deep, so thank you.
Thank you. And Jane, say cheerio.
Bye, thank you, Andy.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Top Lines and Tails, the nation's favourite livestock podcast. And as always, we'd like to thank our sponsors, Harbro, for their continued support. And Harbro have been fantastic in helping us get to this 200th episode. And of course, now this time of year, the show season is coming upon us very fast. And if you're looking to get your stock ready for the summer shows, then get in touch with Harbro and find out what their feeds can do for you, whether it's cattle or sheep. Don't forget, Harbro was founded on top quality feed for pedigree sheep, and they continue to do research and development to make sure their feed is suited to the modern stock now. So let Harbro put your livestock at the top of that queue in the show ring there. So thanks to Harbro. Look them out or find them on the internet. Pop down and see your local representative or to your local store and find out how Harbro can help you. And while you're there on the internet, don't forget to look out our Top Lines and Tails Facebook group, a Facebook community there that we have that will have pictures and other artifacts to back up this and previous episodes.